Hello,
Okay.
hello, hello. It's your girl, Camille B, the HR counselor. I am so excited to have Miss Aisha Scott. And I'm going to break it down exactly what her title is for you. Okay. Miss Aisha is the founder and chief career development enthusiast of Time to Impact 365. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me, Aisha. Hello.
Hello, Camille. I'm excited. So thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We're going to talk about something that is near and dear to Aisha's heart, and that is how to train leaders virtually. So educate us, Aisha. How can we do that as
Right.
HR
So
professionals?
the biggest thing is that you want to make sure you have time. So of course, we know, set the time aside, practice, prepare, all that good stuff. But I love a good working acronym. So I'm going to take you through the T, the I, the M, and the E. Okay.
Get my pen together. Okay.
So the first thing in setting aside that time, the T, is technology. First and foremost, if you are going in and you are the speaker, the trainer, the facilitator, however you choose it to be, you want to make sure that you can jump into that session at least 15 minutes early to make sure that your computer is working, that you can access Zoom, that your internet is working, that your camera is working. Because if for some reason it's not, then it gives you 15 minutes to brainstorm, readjust, find another laptop, find another device. So that is always the first thing in this piece of technology. 15 minutes early is the best practice. One example I can share, I was jumping into somebody else's meeting. I was signing in about 5 minutes early, popped my computer on, and my computer said, "You have mandatory Windows updates happening now." So I had all my passwords and everything saved on this computer. So now I'm trying to jump onto another laptop, reset passwords, get into it was a mess. So always as a best practice when you talk about preparing for any type of training or meeting, the technology piece, sign in at least 15 minutes early, check your computer, your internet, your camera. The other big piece that I think people don't always think about when it comes to virtually facilitating, you've sent out the meeting invite, you've told people when to come, you may have sent a participant guide, you may have done handouts. Anything that you are going to be utilizing during that training session, have it pulled up on your computer. Make sure your PowerPoint is already pulled up. So in that 15 minutes is a lot of time. Make sure your PowerPoint is pulled up. You don't want it to be corrupt. Goodness forbid that it's gone, that PowerPoint is deleted. So again, in that 15 minutes, it's like, okay, my PowerPoint's gone. Let me do a backup. And also if you're giving out handouts, have the handouts pulled up on your computer as well. Here's why. As you're going through the PowerPoint, you create this beautiful PowerPoint. There are two different things that you can do with the handouts. And I think people don't think about this piece. One, you can do a small screenshot or a snippet of the handout or the participant guide, put it into your PowerPoint. So when you get to that point, you're like, hey, we're going to look at page 25. Here's what it looks like on the screen. Or you can drop your PowerPoint, pull up the document and say, look for this document in your in your packet, in your handouts. Because I'll be honest, when people are like, look for this page here, if the page looks like this, that is one of my absolute biggest pet peeves. So you're doing it as a facilitator, and then the people in the training, they're doing, does it look like this one? Use your technology, be prepared with it. Any handouts you have them so you can easily share with the group. It looks like this, it's titled like this, it looks like this. Or like I said, take small snippets, put it into the PowerPoint. So when you get to that point, this is the handout that we're on. That is one of the biggest things I think people don't think about when they're having handouts and PowerPoints and participant guides. Make it easy for the participant. We're not in the same space. And so when it comes to virtual facilitation, it's about doing the extra to make sure we feel like we're in the same space.
I love that. Yes. Okay, yes. So take me through the rest.
The next one, so first the T is technology, the I is insight. And insight goes two different ways. So you want to make sure that you have insight about your audience, because that's going to have an impact on what you put into your presentation, how you present it. Is it going to be high level? Is it going to be detailed? Is it going to be data driven? That's one piece. The other piece when it comes to insight is how you facilitate the session. So we're going to talk about both. When you think about your audience and we talk about leaders, we know there are a lot of different levels of leadership. So you have middle managers, you have AVP level, VPs, C-suite. We know the higher we get up the higher we get up that hierarchy, that their time is a little bit shorter, their attention is a little bit shorter. You are taking them away from the priority of running the organization. For those individuals, get to the heart of the presentation, get to the heart of the details, get to the meat and potatoes. If we're talking data, let's get to data. So your PowerPoint will be data. If we're talking about, updates on get to the point, because their attention span and their time is really short. If it's more a middle manager group, and this might be the first time they're hearing it, give them a little backstory, give them a little more information, keep it high level. And having that insight on who you're talking to will also let you know, do I start off with the PowerPoint the whole time? If it's C-suite level, executive level, and data, we're going to stick to the PowerPoint. If it's that middle manager group where you're giving them this first time look and experience, well, maybe you take the PowerPoint down so that way we can see everybody's boxes and we have a conversation. We talk through the why before we start getting into the details. So that's the first part of insight, is knowing your audience. The second part of insight kind of ties back into the technology piece. When we are in a face-to-face area, people have the little pointer and they can put the little red dot up on the screen or the green dot or what have you. We are in this virtual world, and if I can't do that on the screen, but there are ways to do it. If you're using a PowerPoint, one of the biggest things that I think people miss out on sometimes when it's having insight on how to create material for a session, bullet points, bullet points, bullet points, and bullet points are just your talking points. It's not bullet point in a whole definition. If you put too much information on the screen, people are not going to pay attention to what it is that you want them to focus on. So when it comes to having insight on how to create your content, bullet points. The second thing is that if you're using PowerPoint animations, some people know how to use them. Some people know they exist. Some people don't. But animations will help you to guide the participants to see exactly where it is you are on the screen. The third piece with insight on the technology on how to manage your content is called annotations or annotate. So Camille, have you heard about that one?
Yes, I have.
So with annotate, some people know it's there, some people don't. On most of the web platforms, there is some type of annotation. And what annotation does, it gives you back that little red pointer that you may have had in that face-to-face setting, and you can actually put boxes or arrows on certain things. And it helps, again, for you to guide and manage where people are looking on the screen as you're facilitating your session. So I is insight into your audience and also how to manage your content on the screen.
Awesome. Okay, we have 2 letters left. Tell me what that M stands for.
M is for multiple methods of presentation. Camille, have you ever heard the term death by PowerPoint?
I'm like, PowerPointing me to death.
Death by PowerPoint is a real thing, and especially if the PowerPoint is not done correctly with insight on how it was prepared. So having multiple methods throughout the session, use PowerPoint, that's great. Mix it up a little bit. Include some video snippets into your PowerPoint. That way it gives the learner a different perspective. It allows you to take a break as well as a training instructor or meeting presenter. And it also gives them what we like to call in the learning and development space, micro bursts of knowledge. We know we live in a very technology-driven environment. People are on their smartphones. They're watching, small videos here and there, 2 to 5, 5 to 7 minutes at the most, because after that, folks are zoning out. So having multiple methods, so do a PowerPoint, that's great. Add in some video, that's great. But there's also a lot of gamification out there. Of course, in most of the Zoom, WebEx, whatever platforms, you can do the chat, you can do the poll, and I'm going to talk about the chat in a second. But there are different websites where you can create like some very interactive games to do some polling or some quizzes in between, and it really gets people excited. So instead of just death by PowerPoint, mix it up a little bit. So that way you're pulling the PowerPoint down, you're pulling something else up, and people can kind of adjust and go with you and move with you also.
I like that. It's kind of like that ping pong, you know, going back and forth and utilizing that style. I'm glad you said that, mentioned the multiple methods of presentations, because I know for myself, my train of thought, you know, it's like, oh, squirrel, you know what I mean? And I will just start to like, just be in my own little head and thinking about multiple millions of different things I have to do. Maybe I have to work on something. So it's so important that we use, especially trainers, use multiple different ways to keep us engaged. Yes. I love it. Yes, go ahead, continue.
Well, Camille, you just took my fourth letter for time, which is engage.
Yes, I knew I was on to something.
So we want to focus on the technology, having insight, multiple methods when we present, and that engagement piece in this virtual space is very different. I know for myself, having to transition from being in the classroom to doing everything virtual, it was a new muscle for me to learn as well. And I love it because I'm learning new things every time I sit in on somebody else's session. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do that. That's really great. One of the key things, and I do it and I try to be careful how I do it. We've got to put some movement in this box. Well, actually rectangle. As trainers and instructors, we've been taught for so many years when you're in the classroom, don't do a whole lot of hand movements because it distracts, and keep your hands, you know, right here at that center focal point. But if you just sit and you don't put any movement in your box, you become a head in a box. When it comes to engagement, you know, if you have different points, put some emphasis. I think even when I was talking about different methods and you're talking about ping pong, and kind of move in and out, have people move with you. So that's one of the pieces of engagement, is put some movement into your box. The next thing, a lot of people use the chat. The chat function is really great to engage, but it's all about how you do it as well. If you ask people to drop something into the chat, how do you feel about this? First and foremost, make sure you acknowledge the chat, because if you're asking people to drop things into the chat and you don't ever acknowledge it, then I'm going to stop putting things into the chat. So when you ask people to put things into the chat, be like, oh, great response there, great response, acknowledge it. Camille, here's another thing with that chat. Use people's names. People love to hear their name. You shout them out, they feel real good. You put some more chat into the box, and they know that you're going to put my name. If my manager's on this call, I'm going to look real good because you keep on calling my name. So so you want to make sure when you're using the chat, it's a great function, a lot of different ways to play with it. You can do yes and no's in the chat. I get creative sometimes because I get a little bored. And so if it's an afternoon session and I know I'm kind of wearing down, I'll tell folks, I'm like, if you agree with me, put hot coffee in the chat because I need some hot coffee to keep me going. So have fun in the chat, but it's a way to engage, but make sure that you are acknowledging the acknowledging the responses, and also shouting people out, giving them credit for jumping into the chat.
I love that. I jotted down a few things like, okay, I like it. I like it a lot.
I have two more and then we'll kind of wrap. Another piece, engage. I'm going to actually take it back to the technology and the annotate. A lot of the different platforms will allow you to give the participants annotate ability. So they can actually do check marks on the screen. They can do arrows on the screen. If you're like, look at this screen and tell me, you know, what do you feel or what do you, they can scribble on the screen. They can type on the screen. So another way to keep them engaged, let them run the session. And the biggest thing when it comes to engagement, and especially at that leadership level, is listen. Sometimes it's tough depending on who it is, you know, to get them to talk. But if your content is set up where you have put the insight into your audience, you know who it is you're talking to, what it is you need to get from them, it's also an opportunity for them to learn from each other as well. So give them a chance to talk. Give them a chance to share their insight and listen to them, because that will also help you to guide your session. But listening to the group will also help facilitate your session. So even with you, where I was talking about multiple methods and you were like, yeah, that's a way to engage. Guess what? You've already taught my next piece. Listen to your group and let them guide that engagement as well.
I really like that. That was all. That's like, that is. So when you say that is how you train your leaders virtually, what other things do you use to ensure that they're getting the proper training so that they can pass this down to their teams?
It's important if you are doing a participant guide. I think that's a really big thing. Give it to them in advance. When you just drop stuff and be like, all right, we're going to have a participant guide for this session. Here you go. You can have it now. Well, then somebody has to go print it. Somebody has to pull it up. Somebody has to find it. Depending on, again, the level of the group that you're talking to, giving them your PowerPoint slides in advance. That way, if you're talking definitions or content, quantitative data versus qualitative, they have the PowerPoint there and they can just write what additional notes they need related to the data that you've provided to them, on the PowerPoint. So those are two big things. If you're doing handouts in advance, if it's a, leadership level, and when I say leadership, sometimes I mean like that VP executive level, give them everything in advance so that way they know what they're coming to the table for. They know the questions that they want to ask. And then always just kind of following up, throwing things into the chat, getting people engaged. I use breakout sessions sometimes depending on the group because that allows them to kind of brainstorm. Breakouts are also great for those people that are a little more introverted and they don't like talking in the big group. They will talk in the smaller groups. So using breakouts, depending on the session in the group, definitely a great thing. And then again, when they come back in the breakouts, let them facilitate the content.
I love that. That is awesome. So time, technology, insight, multiple methods of presentations, and engage your audience. I love that. But now I'm going to ask you about you. What is it about training that, because just from our conversation, what is it about training that makes you so passionate? Why are you so passionate about training?
I'll be honest, Camille, I don't even think it's a passion about training. It's more about educating. That is one of the biggest things for me. I think it's so important. And I kind of get that excitement and that passion to help educate other people so they can have those light bulb moments, so they can have those aha moments. Anything I know, I tell my team all the time, whatever you want to know, you can know. Whatever you want to do, I will tell you because you can take my job tomorrow if you want it. Like I want to give you everything that you need so that you can advance to whatever that next step is. So the training piece is important because if you do it correctly, it impacts and has a huge impact on people being able to retain the information. But I think more of the passion for me is just helping educate career professionals to be able to advance in their careers. And even some of it is about just personal insight and perspective.
Absolutely. It was so much. It was so much in such a short amount of time. But I absolutely adore you anyway, Aisha. But I adore the fact that you have come up with this acronym and it's so useful right now because we are having, presentations after presentation. And I know for myself, it's like one more presentation and I may not make it, right? And especially because I'm not engaged. So it's really good to know individuals like yourself are truly out there trying to make a difference, coming up with a plan. Now, don't y'all go out here stealing her strategy with the time. Y'all can take some things, but I love the fact, that you came up with a way to say, okay, how can I engage these employees, whether it's your entry level to your senior, and I cannot agree with you more. Senior leadership, give me the data. How much is this going to cost and how much is this going to save? Like that's the kind of conversation that they're, and they want one pagers. They don't want a laundry list of 54 slides. They just don't. They want you to make it simple. Like I always say, keep it simple, stupid. I'm usually referring to myself because I need things to be simplified. So it sounds like this process using your time method, because that's what I'm going to call it, the Aisha Scott time method for training. Look at that.
We're going to trademark that right there. We're going to accept it. We're going to trademark it.
Scott time method, right? For training. And that by using that technology, the insight, the multiple methods of presentation and engaging your audience, that really makes it easier for you to get to understand what they need. Now, when you created this method, do you see a lot of positive impact? Is it positively getting the information out to employees? Have you maybe did data to make sure, hey, is this working versus what I tried in the past?
I want to say this. One of I have a project right now that I'm working with, and we're rolling out this service excellence, customer service excellence initiative across the board to the entire organization. And incorporating some of these pieces, utilizing some of the breakouts, giving them the participant guides in the beginning, bringing down the PowerPoint to have all of the screens so that we can have conversations. The feedback, working on that quantitative data, but the feedback in this moment is, it was good, number one, because we're still in this pandemic, for that group to be like, oh, it's so good to see everybody. So in those moments where we took the PowerPoint down to really focus on seeing everybody's boxes, they were like, it felt so good to see everybody. Because we were going through a lot of information, them having the participant guide in advance, like I was like, all right, everybody pull your participant guide out. And my participants, they were like, this one, right? Like I was like, yes, the participant, yes, that's what we're in right now. So they were in it. They were engaged just by having their participant guide on the front end, and then having the different activities, utilizing the chat. Like I said, people love when you shout their name out, because you shout them out in the chat, and then what do? They keep responding back. I was like, all right, what did everybody have for breakfast? And somebody said something and it was really good. And I was like, oh, that sounds so great. And then in the chat, they were like, well, I can tell you where I got it from. And then somebody else was like, well, let me know where you, and then the chat became a way for them to engage. And all of that just makes a big impact. Another thing I heard really quickly made me think, talking about the PowerPoint and giving the PowerPoint in advance, especially to that executive senior level leadership. Another thing that I do also is, if I have a deck that I'm going to be facilitating from with about 40 slides, I will give them a condensed version of the deck with the things that are the most pertinent to them. So their slides that they get might be 15 slides with just the points that are relevant to them. So that's another thing too, when you think about that insight aspect of who is your audience.
Absolutely. Aisha, it is always a pleasure. Now, let's say they're watching this and they say, how do we get a hold of Aisha? Because she gets to understand what this training world is really like. And I would love some tips. How do people reach out to you, Aisha?
So 2 different ways. First is on my website, of course. So www.timetoimpact365.com. So TIMETOIMPACT 365.com, because it is your time to impact 365 days of the year.
Love it.
I can also be reached via email. So info@timetoimpact365.com, and all of my social platforms. So Instagram, oh gosh, what are all of them? Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn are all the same handle, Time to Impact 365.
Awesome. Awesome. So please, people, get a hold of Aisha. She's amazing. Again, Aisha, I cannot thank you enough. This has been awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to those watching, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.
Thanks, Camille.
You're so welcome.